Up and running.
There we are.
There we are.
No, man, I mean, you can't ever get used to that.
So, for the viewers who don't know, we are sitting on a cliff, and where you guys are watching from is the ocean.
Just straight, like surfers. I mean, you can see the light coming through the clouds here. I mean, it's a little cloudier than I'd like, but even with the clouds, it's like...
Actually, though, that can be good for the lighting, because sometimes if it's just like...
Just soften it a little bit.
Yeah, sunshot in the face. Dude, but this school, if I wasn't a dropout and I wanted to be in school...
It's ridiculous.
This is cheat code school,
yeah,
bro.
it's pretty ridiculous.
Like, you live next to the beach, surf, beautiful people.
Yeah, and when I came out, like, realized I was going here, it was the middle of, like, winter, and so I was flying from the East Coast, like, my cold college. And I got here, I was like, man... Like, this is nice. Like, middle of November, and it's like this is nice.
That's a trip, too, because, I mean, I'm so lucky. Dude, Southern California is one of the most desired places to live in the world. Debatably the most desired.
Right. If it wasn't for how expensive it is, I mean,
I heard
long term.
Actually, that by minimum wage to rent, that San Diego is the most expensive city in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what I heard. It could have been a news title, but it's more expensive than
it's got to be up there even.
Yeah. Wow. Dude, this is incredible. So, welcome back to the show, Respectfully Inspired with Aussie Films. I like to start off every episode with my why, which is I want to inspire you to invest in soul wealth. So not the classic wealth, which is building up your money, possessions, achievement, or status, but measuring success by soul wealth, which is the quality of your relationships and the quality of your memories. Today, I'm here with Joshua Scott. He is a YouTuber, currently based in San Diego, looking at the ocean right now, but he is from Massachusetts?
Originally Massachusetts, lived there till I was 14 and then moved to Salisbury, Maryland, which I tried to not claim as my home, but then I moved away from Salisbury, and for whatever reason, like, I have a lot of hometown pride from Maryland and Salisbury now too, so yeah, Boston then Maryland.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, how you would like to be introduced.
Man, well, I'm Josh. I make YouTube videos. They're kind of vlog style storytelling every now and then. Pretty much once every 3 months I'll start making them again and stuff. Looking to be a little bit more consistent with that stuff, but I think everyone as they're starting out is. Yeah, I just, want people to love each other and feel loved and as cliche, I don't know, it's kind of a cliche introduction, but that's my goal through the videos, and yeah, I don't know.
You know what's
I
so
enjoy
interesting
basketball.
about that? Oh, you said you played
I enjoy basketball or stuff like that. I don't know. Yeah.
But I was going to say, what's so interesting is I've probably asked that question 39 times now since you're my 39th episode.
Right.
And everyone in America, which all my guests are from America, I probably had 2 or 3 who weren't actually, but when you ask someone to introduce themselves or you meet someone in a public area in America and the first question is always, what do you do? People define themselves by their career here.
Right.
If you were in the Middle East, you know what the first question would be? Who's your dad?
Yeah.
People define themselves by their family. So they go, we get our identity from our job, our work, and I think that's a huge reason why social media and YouTube is so big here. And over in the Middle East, they get their identity from their family. It's like, what does your dad do? It's why your last names have significance, because in the old world, your last name was your career.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that is an interesting way to think about it too. It's kind of funny to see how in that way, like Western culture starts to, through social media, because the majority of social media apps are developed like here.
Yeah.
How it almost intrudes a little bit on Eastern culture. And, well, no, sorry. Reverse it, because we're Eastern.
Yeah.
Going West. Like, I don't know. It's interesting to see, especially with like the rise of YouTube and stuff like that in India, and seeing how sometimes you can watch some of the Indian short films and you're like, oh, that's where we were like 6 years ago, content creation wise.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just the same thing. It's just kind of with their own twist on it. I don't know. It's kind of cool.
That is interesting. In the content world, the other countries are like lagging behind us. And
yeah, I wouldn't even, lagging's an okay term to use it, but it's almost like, I think it's hard to say that they're lagging if they just didn't start at the same time.
Yeah.
And so they'll definitely catch up quicker than we did, because that's just, how things work when everything's already on the table.
Yeah.
But no, it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, I have a couple content creator friends who live in other countries, some even in third world countries, and I always tell them to play into their country, because so many people in those other countries, they want to mimic what America does.
Right.
And I'm actually going to extend on this idea with like the whole beastification and the gamified content too.
Yeah.
Because it's not just for other countries to America, but within America, people are always have this copy culture. I don't know if copy is the right word.
It's funny. I don't know. I think the focus is less on copying and more on an uninspired pursuit. Maybe not even uninspired, but just what do you call it? Like a narrow focused pursuit of success, which then results in copying, right?
Yeah.
You see, no matter what you see, who's at the top.
Yeah.
You see it every single time. The Casey Neistat. When Casey Neistat was number one, you had everybody started switching to daily vlogging.
Yeah.
Now Mr. Beast at the top, you got everybody doing Mr. Beast style videos. And so is it because they want to copy Mr. Beast? I don't think if you asked any person,
Yeah.
they'd be like, oh, I want to copy Mr. Beast, but everybody will say the same thing. I want to be successful,
Yeah.
right? And so the easiest path would be who's already successful, and then how do I take that and make it into my own? Now, hopefully people are adapting onto what has been done. But I think that's where many issues come in content today is there's not enough adaptation. And why adapt? If it's a proven strategy that's making a lot of money and generating a lot of clicks and views, which I think now we're kind of at the tail end of it, where it's starting to fall off a little bit. But for a while, why adapt?
I can answer that question.
Well, so can I for myself. But yeah.
But I think you laid that out really well. That was a well way to put it. The soul wealth message, which I said at the beginning, which is you change the way you measure success from status, fame, possessions, money, likes. I think that a lot of people do this emulating game where they're not, like you said, they're not copying someone because they are like, I want to copy them. They're just asking themselves, what is the quickest way to success? And because they define success as views and money,
Right. That's where
it goes. But the issue is that when they get there, and maybe in the first year, it's all hype because new experiences, it feels wild, you made it. But most people, it leaves them kind of empty because the videos that they blew up for aren't actually what they enjoy making.
Yeah.
And that's what I did Creator Now. So for the viewers who don't know what Creator Now is, it's a YouTube course run by a big YouTuber named Eric. And I believe you did it as well, did you?
Yeah, so not in the traditional sense. I think Creator Now structure is like it's supposed to put you in your group and you're supposed to go through these Zoom calls and stuff like that. I haven't done any of that. Maybe I should. I think there's parts of it that'd be helpful, kind of as keeping each other in check when we're creating. But I signed up. One of the editors I really respect on YouTube for storytelling, Hayden Hillier-Smith, did a series on there. And so in order to get the series, you signed up for Creator Now, and I thought it was worth it for me, and I still do. And so, I did that series, but
Yeah, so what I was saying with that is that I had done Creator Now. I know Josh, at the very least, you have a lot of friends who have done Creator Now.
Yes.
And at the time when I was going through it, I thought it was friggin' amazing. I was like, oh, I'm meeting other YouTubers, like I'm learning it, how to make better videos. But then I realized through going through that course that it was teaching me how to be successful by numeric metrics. And I realized it was making me hate YouTube because I didn't enjoy what I was making at all. And it's not, I'm not here to come diss on Creator Now, but I'm here to say it's so easy in this world to think that you want something you don't. So when you start off, you generally have a reason. So for me, I was a lonelier kid in high school, and there was YouTubers I looked up to, and they felt like my friends. So I wanted to make other kids feel how they made me feel.
Right.
But then when I asked myself, how do I get there? I started making videos that were nothing like the ones that I liked.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and that's why I came to this podcast, why I diverted most of YouTube to here, because I was like, this is a place where even if it never amounted to anything, I wouldn't regret it because I'm passionate about conversation and sitting down, meeting people.
Yeah.
And I think you've been creating a long time, and you're kind of in that world of creator now type videos, but you also are very much a storyteller. How do you feel about that phenomenon that I just laid out?
Well, it's interesting. I've kind of been on both ends of the spectrum. I think I come from a very business-minded. My mother is very business-minded.
Yeah.
And so she works in business, and I see that a lot. And I think there's something to, maybe not even calling it a metric of success, but depending on where your end goal is, you have to have a business mindset. So I want to storytell things that make an impact, or at least at very minimum, people go away and be like, that's different, and I like that, right? I want them to hold that. But also, there is an algorithm part of that. There is something I have to play into. Now, whether or not I go down a path and say, you know what, I'm not going to take things that have already been done in our tried and true methods, and I'm going to try and find one that hasn't been done because I like that creativity, that's one route. Mm-hmm. There is some route to, first 30 seconds, you want to show, it's like that, okay, I'm going to cliffhang immediately within first 30 seconds, then I'm going to jump back to the beginning of the story, but I'm going to be very fast-paced, right? That you kind of talk under that Mr. Beast style video. And I don't think that's inherently bad either. I think when it becomes a system that is not leaving room for creative storytelling, that's when it can be detrimental to like creativity as a whole. And so my goal would be to be able to have that business mindset, but also make sure that I'm not just another one in that system, right? I'm trying to make different videos that people look at and they're not like, oh, this is just another, copycat of this. I don't ever want to be grouped under that. I think sometimes growing, it's really easy to fall under that trap. For instance, a lot of my thumbnails are very, like, you could line them up next to Mr. Beast thumbnails, or just these stereotypical like beastification thumbnails. And so that's one thing I talked to my thumbnail editor the other day, and I was like, hey, I kind of want to move away from this. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just that's not what I want my channel to look like. I don't want somebody to stumble across and immediately go, oh, he's going to fall under that umbrella.
And that will happen, and you're smart for identifying that. Right.
And there are, like, there's plenty of 10-year-olds out there who are going to be like, oh, because this looks like that, I want to watch that, right? And that's great. I mean, if that's what somebody wants for their channel, I'm not going to judge them for that. But no, to round back to the original question, like, I'm probably not as negative on it, just because with any creative asset, I mean, look at film. Yeah. Right? You got two major films, Oppenheimer and Barbie. Barbie, I'm not sure anybody would tell you it's a cinematic masterpiece. It's a very funny movie. Yeah. It follows a very typical Hollywood, structure. Yeah. And it made $700 billion at the box office this year, right? Yeah. Then you got Oppenheimer, that does a ton of new things for film. Yeah. Both are very successful. Barbie has a little bit more success if you're only looking at money, but Oppenheimer's going to win, probably break records at the Oscars this year. Yeah. And so, is Barbie a bad movie because it's not doing things that Oppenheimer did? I don't think so. They're two different goals, right? Yeah. Is Oppenheimer a worse movie than Barbie because it didn't make $700 million? No, that wasn't the goal of Oppenheimer. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I think kind of taking that into a YouTube space is this creator who's very much copying like Arax and Mr. Beast type stuff, and is growing, but it feels shallow. Is that bad videos? Well, no. It's kind of subjective, right? Is this creator that may not have 100K is getting small numbers of views, but their videos are more inspiring to some, right? Is that bad because they're not getting the views? I wouldn't say no to that either. And so I don't know.
That's interesting. I do really think, though, what you're laying out is how you measure success. And actually, I would go as far to say, for example, if I were to go on the street and start selling bananas per se,
right,
and I was killing it, making money selling bananas, never in my life did I feel like my calling is to sell bananas. But no one would necessarily look down on it because they look at it and they go, that's a business. It's like when a kid sells lemonade. Their destiny's not to sell lemonade, but you go, that's a business. Yet if someone goes on YouTube and they create something they're not passionate about and it gets views and it hits an audience, people are like, oh, that's cringe, or like that. And that's me. I'm just speaking against myself.
Yeah.
And I think the thing you need to clarify is that YouTube is now a career option. Back in the day, it was a place for art. Now it is a place for art, and it is fully a career option. And you can be as far as completely an artist, you can be as far as completely a business, or you can be a mix of the two.
Right.
And that's something that's really interesting, because I think even as little as 4 years ago when I started, it was still primarily art, and now it's just as much business as it is art.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get some of the pushback and some. I wonder sometimes if some of the vanity comes from, well, sometimes I wonder if a lot of, we'll call them, we'll group them by business as the B side, and then the art as anything that's not directly tailored towards views. I wonder sometimes if that rift between the two, or the arguing between the two, stems from some of the art stuff is like frustration. Why can't the audience appreciate what I'm doing over here? And why are they going into the constant candy store of, oh, I want to see this, oh, everything's bright colors, you know? And that's where my struggle comes, is because I don't think the two can't live together.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of just anywhere in general, but I struggle with people yelling at each other, hey, what you're doing is awful, you know?
Yeah.
What you're doing, you shouldn't be doing it that way, because who cares? It's like if I were to tell you how to paint your painting, right? If you're trying to make a ton of paintings like that, and make a lot of money, you're just going to do that. I mean, I might say, I'm not going to buy your painting personally, but there's going to be people who do that. Or else you're trying to make this Pablo Picasso painting that's crazy, and clearly you're going to have less buyers because it's not everyone's eye, right? But I don't know. I don't think they're mutually exclusive as people like to portray them.
Yeah. Another thing, as you're speaking, and I know you were using this for the purpose of the generalization, but you said, like, let's put business as beast and art as these other creators.
Sure.
I think another thing, too, is that people look at a video and they say, this is art, or this is business, or this is real, or this is fake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the piece. I think it's the piece in the context of the person. So when Mr. Beast makes a Mr. Beast video, yes, he's a great businessman, but if you were to ask me, is he passionate about what he does? I'd be like, yeah, he's passionate with his whole existence. You can't get to his level without being passionate with your whole... If you ask me, is Eric passionate about what he does? I would say, of course he's passionate.
Yeah.
You can't get to his level if you're not. The issue, I think, is where people fall in that fake category. They feel like they're not themselves. Goes back to what we brought up in the beginning, is that the reason they want to create is not aligned with what they believe makes them successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I found myself when I was making those videos. But it's not like I look at those videos and I'm like, that kid's fake. It's like, I think a good question to ask, and maybe it's even worth asking you, is if you knew the metrics were consistent, in some fantasy land, you're going to have 1 million subscribers, you're going to get the same views, the same comments, the same, everything else that comes after hitting post is going to be the same, would you be making the videos that you're making?
Right. Yeah. I think it's a good structure to think about, but I also think there's a catch-22 with that being, it won't ever be like that, right? So you have to bounce out. Is that something that you need as a result? Because if it is, you got to be okay with the struggle of, okay, that's not what YouTube is right now, or that's not what the algorithm pushes right now, and it might not ever be, but at least I enjoy making this, right? And that kind of goes back to your point. If you're okay with that, fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you're not, that's when you start to ask the question of like, okay, well, is this something I'm actually passionate about?
Yeah.
Because if that's a thought process you're having, you're just right back in that idea of you do want views.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Is if that's the line of thinking you have, you are doing it for the views and money. And as I said, there's no issue with that. But
it's also interesting because my whole brand is soul wealth. But if I were to sit here and say I didn't want views and money, like I'd be lying,
Right.
And the reason is not that I'm a Scrooge who's like thinking every move with money and views. It's because I want my passion to be my career. And that's where most people are.
Right.
Another thing that I picked out when you were talking that I think is interesting is that emulating success is a good strategy that has worked forever. But when you're talking about going to the next level or being one of those legendary creators, legendary basketball players, football players, it's always going to be something new. Like the next Mr. Beast is not going to be making Mr. Beast videos.
Right.
Because he would never be as good at it.
Yeah.
And that's...
Well, that or he would be better. And that's the question, right? Like what was better than Casey Neistat? Well, what came after Casey Neistat? You know what I mean?
Over again.
Right, like was it...
But it was still new.
Yeah. I mean, you look at to go back to film. Yeah. Like nothing is new. Well, there's very little new in film.
Yeah.
There's adaptations that as a whole create something that feels new.
Yeah.
And so kind of like there's nothing really new in vlogging. There's adaptations of like, montage kind of grew really big with Casey Neistat. Drone shots definitely, I think, can be pointed almost straight to Casey Neistat. Yeah. And so like that, how do I adapt that into my content now where it's slightly different, where the viewer hasn't seen it and be like, oh, that's better, that's entertaining, that's what I want to use. And so I think everything in life is innovation.
Yeah.
And so if you're just copying, that's fine. Everybody likes that.
Yeah.
But if your goal is to step outside, it's innovating off that base template, And you can just be someone who copies until someone does something new and you're like, oh, I'll copy that. That's fine. But I don't know that would be fulfilling if your goal is to create something new and original.
Another interesting thing you pointed out, I loved how you said success from the point of how someone feels, how the viewer feels. Because I think oftentimes when we watch something, we've both had moments where we've watched something on YouTube and you're like, I want to make something like this. But when you say that to yourself, I don't think it's that you always want to make something like that. Is you want to make something that makes people feel how that video made you feel. And that's an interesting concept too. Because almost all my biggest inspirations, it's never like I want to recreate what they created. It's like I love the emotion that they gave me and I want to pass that on.
Right.
Which is interesting. I think you've done something really unique with your utilization of Twitter, X, to score interviews with people like Coleman Samir, Mike Malak, and now you're trying with Ryan Tran. Could you tell them a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I have a Twitter account called Tweeting, or at @TweetTootBreakfast, and essentially it's tweeting at certain influencer every day until they let me buy them breakfast. And so technically the first person I ever did was Gary Vee. And so this is a businessman who, he's still pretty popular.
He's big.
He used to, I think, be, I don't want to say more relevant, but just more in the stream. There was a while where Gary Vee was kind of like the pre-Andrew Tate. Now, I don't want to compare the two because they're drastically different. I just mean in how much in their face they would be if you're scrolling through social media or TikTok or some homepage, right? And so I started tweeting at him. So day 1, day 2, day 3, I didn't really think it'd go anywhere. And on day 13, he replied and he said, sorry, I'm just too busy right now. And some people were like, oh, feel bad for you. I'm like, feel bad for me? He just proved that I can get the attention of someone that much bigger than me. And I'm like, oh, this isn't a loss. This is a huge win. What I'm doing could work. And so I shifted to Casey Neistat, and this is near the height of COVID.
Wait, as you tell this story, with each person, can you mention your follower count? Just because I think it's an interesting
at the time, I mean,
aspect.
Probably 0 at Gary Vee.
Really? 0? And 13 tweets in, you noticed?
Yeah, well, it's just because you generate, like, communities that are really well formed and really caring will support you because they're like, oh, this is cool. And so what would happen is day one, oh, this is kind of an interesting thing. Day two, oh, I remember seeing him in the replies earlier. I'm going to like it. Day three, reply. I'm going to reply, hey, Gary, check this out. So that was what would happen. His community would kind of surround it. And so, yeah, I don't know. Before I go on, I don't know if you had any more questions.
Yeah, sorry to throw you off your flow.
No, that's all right.
I just think it's particularly interesting because I'm really trying to utilize Twitter to get podcast guests right now. And I was partially inspired by your stories. And I wanted to know, like, dude, did this kid have like 5,000 followers? Like, have a team, right?
No.
Damn, so 13 tweets out of nothing is, to me, the interesting part of that is not that people would rally behind you. It's that they would rally behind you seeing that you have such low followers. Because a lot of times people will put your accountability to your follower count.
Right. And so that's what was kind of difficult starting off. And so to pivot towards Casey Neistat, next person. I have no credibility at this point. I haven't done it with anybody. And I like Casey Neistat. At the time, he was like really, really inspiring for me. And so I started tweeting at him, height of COVID. Casey Neistat has a very, very liberal audience, which isn't a bad thing. But during the height of COVID, what that means is I started getting, I won't call it hate, even though I'm sure it'd be appropriate to, but I get replies and be like, you're a moron. In the middle of COVID, you'd go outside right now like that. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, read the room. And I'm like, all right, this is not the community to be doing this in right now. Nothing bad. I'm not offended by it. Time to pivot. And so I was reading at the time The Fifth Vital by Mike Malak, who's a much scrappier creator. And as a as a result, has a more scrappy following that's also pretty loving. So I was like, I'm going to try Mike Malak. So I start tweeting at Malak. That community aspect generates again. I start gaining followers. So they're like, let's see how long. By day 14, someone by the creator of Mel replied to my tweet and said at Mike, like something, I forget what it was, but she said something to Mike. Mike liked her response and replied to her. So I knew Mike had seen it. I was like, okay. And I keep going. And on day 100, I think it was day 100, somebody replies again and Mike goes, see, I want to, but like, who is this kid? Or like, is he insane? Like, where is he even from? You know, what? Well, and so I reply, Mike from Maryland, willing to fly to wherever you are, right? I plant that. Finally, on day 14 or 114, kind of funny that 14 is the number that keeps coming up. I say it, he goes, all right, I'm in, message me the details. So we message, we schedule things up. By the way, the community like surrounding it, like while small, it was insane. Like everybody was like, let's go, like it's happening, And this is just like,
well, that's cool.
20 to 50 people at the time, right? Nothing crazy, but it still felt pretty awesome. So anyway, I fly out to LA. I'm sitting in a little park that we found that I sent him the address of. And I'm like, I don't know. I've got these cue card questions. I've got questions from Twitter because I wanted to honor that community base. And then I'm like, I don't know if he'll show up. And then he sends me a voice memo. He's like, hey, Josh, about 25 minutes out. And that's when it became real. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah.
And there was really no time to panic because as soon as he showed up, I just saw him. It's like, oh, that's him. Here's a guy that like I've been watching for a while now online, almost doesn't seem real, walking towards me. Like, all right, I have to just be cordial now. Yeah. And so, did that interview and then
I'm a fan of Mike Malak.
So moving on.
That would be a surreal moment. And I did watch your whole interview. I thought it was very interesting, quite similar to this format.
Yeah, no, it was funny. I had, there were moments in there that were like, amateur moments. One thing I did, one big takeaway, and this isn't against him or anything like that, but I learned, at least for the majority of my videos, I will make sure that some branding of my own is in the shot. I had a clip of him saying, I knew I was going to make it or something. It was this great quote, but I had edited it so it was just his still shot.
Yeah.
Which is great for my video, but then he clipped it, put it on his Instagram. I got like 1 million impressions and 500,000 like total views and watches, and there was nowhere that it said like Joshua Scott interview or tweet to breakfast. I'm like,
damn,
could at least tag. No, but and
that's interesting.
And then from there, I ended up doing, I think next was FaZe Rug, which is a crazy story, and then Colin and Samir, and right now I've been tweeting Ryan Trahan for a little over a year, and so
You were having an internal debate whether you should move on or
yeah, I actually can check. I put a Twitter poll out today because now to answer the follower question, I've got like 1,015, and I've got like 7 people with tweet notification, at minimum 7 people who get notified every time I do it and instantly like, and then I've got 5 people who are retweeting it every day alongside with me. One guy's at like 72 days of tweeting at Ryan Trahan until he lets at Tweet to Breakfast buy him breakfast, which is like, it's kind of,
That's
it's
funny.
just weird. It's cool. Especially to look back and see where it was from. Like, think of those Casey Neistat days where everybody was like, you're a moron for doing this, and how it shifted. But, yeah, no, it's been a fun journey. It'd be cool if one day it really morphed into something big, but it's never been something that's like got millions of views or anything like that, which is kind of like nice in a way, you know, because it's stayed pretty local. And yeah, I don't know.
I'm seeing some pros and cons. To me, the pros are you can bat way out of your league, which is having Mike Malak as your first guest. He's bigger than any of my 39 guests. Numerically.
Right.
Again, I'm trying to measure people by souls, but for this purpose of this example. But the cons is, and like what you say is, you're not really getting reps. So sometimes you show up, you're interviewing a world-class person, you're like, dude,
Yeah.
you know, usually people don't get those kind of people till they're 100 episodes in.
Right.
Or prepared to
Yeah.
lay down a good interview, lay down a good studio. And those are the 2 big pros and cons, but I really love the idea. And I think there's a lot to learn from the audience. You should say whatever your thoughts you have on that, but then elaborate on what FaZe Rug did for you, because I think that's a really cool little story.
Yeah, well, no, just touching kind of on the reps thing. There have been moments where it's shown. FaZe Rug interview, I think, is the best interview. Well, I know it's the best interview I've personally done. It helped that he was such a nice guy. We had an hour and a half before to kind of just feel each other. The jitters were gone. You know, I felt like I was hanging out with a friend. And yeah, just to kind of add to that point, like, it's nice that it doesn't get the views, because sometimes I think if it did get the views, it would almost take away from what it is. Because part of the fun of it is I am so small. So the thrill that people that follow and myself get is like, hey, you got him to bite, right? This giant entity, you know, is willing to do this with you, and that's fun. If Tweet to Breakfast gets big, then it's like another podcast that they're like, I should go on.
Yeah.
Which one day, hopefully, it turns into. But I'm appreciating the journey it is right now, because I know that as soon as, like, the day that Twitter account has, like, say it ever gets 100,000 followers, the impressions are easy. Day 1 of tweeting, immediately I've got 1,000 likes, right, in the replies.
Yeah.
And I'm ratioing whoever I'm even tweeting at, right? It almost softens what it is. And so if it even as a project ever gets there, who knows if I run it that long, but it's cool.
I think another
cool to
thing,
appreciate it as a journey now.
I'm a fan of Mike Malak.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with the story. I'm familiar with what he does. I've sent him cold emails before. She's read and not replied to.
How do you know he's read them?
I have an email tracker.
Oh man.
But I don't know that he's read them.
You know, someone has opened them.
A manager has probably opened it and went, nope.
Yeah.
But I will say, even as a fan, it's a cool experience, because it's something that I can see of Mike's that I know most of his other fan base hasn't seen. It's almost like I shared an intimate moment that
With him,
if the interview had a million views, you know, it's cool, but I know that most of his fan base has seen it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is another cool layer of that whole idea.
Yeah. And so to get to the FaZe Rug, yeah, I was tweeting at FaZe Rug. I was on day 69 was the first day he acknowledged its existence. He liked the tweet. Funny number, haha. And then I was going. I think on day 69, actually, he DM'd me, and he asked me where I was from, where I was based out of. And that was a crazy moment, because oh, this might happen. And he's substantially bigger than Mike Malak, right? And so if we're basing it by
that's a really interesting
metrics, right?
thing.
And so I tell him everything like that, you know, and doesn't reply. I said, Marilyn. Then on day 99, it's a long weekend from my school. And I had decided to go visit my grandmother up in Massachusetts. And so I get in the car and I'm at a point where like, I'm not in a good spot. I was surrounded by a ton of people I love and appreciate, but like I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I wanted to do YouTube, but I was feeling pretty flat with it. I wasn't very inspired and nothing was coming. Like, I just wasn't sure that's what I wanted to continue doing. I didn't move out to California like my dream kind of was to pursue it, and I felt like I had trapped myself. And so as I'm driving in the car, no camera, no computer, just my iPad, I finally get to this low moment where I say to myself, I'm like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to do YouTube. I'm just going to, join the system, the corporate life system, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm just going to do the normal 9 to 5, and whatever. Again, not a bad thing, but right now that's not my dream. But I'd given up on the dream. I said, I'm not going to pursue this anymore.
You had a mental quitting moment.
Right. Within 30 seconds, I swear to you, 30 seconds of me going, I'm done. I get a notification and I see it as I'm driving. I'm really like this. I got my Apple Watch and I see FaZe Rug logo. FaZe Rug has sent you a message. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I opened Twitter. He's like, hey, can you be in San Diego tomorrow? And I'm like, driving on I-95 North with no camera or anything. I'm like, oh my God, I can't say no to this.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what am I going to do? I start calling my parents. I'm like, hey, I don't know. I left my camera. Do I turn around and try to go get my camera right now? It's like 7 p.m. I'll get my camera by 1, and then I got to figure out where I'm flying out of. What do I do? Do we have the money to do this right now? And finally, after like 5 minutes discussing, we were like, yeah, I got a message back. And my mom was like, yeah, we'll ask him, tell him you're driving towards Boston and say you got to look at flights and can try and see if you can make it happen. I was like, okay. And so I'm like, hey, got to look at flights first. I'll be flying out of Boston. I'm driving there right now. And he goes, oh, don't worry about prices or anything. Just tell me where you want to fly out of and I'll book it. Or actually, you book whatever flight you want. Send me a screenshot. I'll Venmo you. And I was like, what? This guy's going to pay to fly me out for an interview I've been asking him to do. And so sure enough, I'm like, well, now I have to go.
Yeah.
I have no excuse not to. So I drive up. I tell my grandma, I'm like, hey, love you. Need you to drive me to the airport tomorrow. I can't stay here. I've got, this thing to do. And she's fully supportive. I land. I go over and I get these cameras. I rent these cameras and I rent these microphones. And then one thing I do with Tweet to Breakfast is I like giving everybody an interview a t-shirt because I think it's a cool thing that maybe if they network, they're like, I don't expect them ever to really wear the t-shirt. I'm sure one of them is at a Goodwill right now, if not all three. But it's a cool thing to be like, oh, I have that. Oh, you did that. I did that. Yeah. Maybe one day it'll come up in conversation. Well, I didn't have that because I didn't have my computer and that had all my files. And so I had an RA go into my room, unlock my door, unlock my computer, and send me the files to my iPad. I went that same day and got a t-shirt printed. So I had everything I needed, and then I made questions. And then after being there the very next day, I woke up, FaZe Rug came and picked me up, and we actually came just right above where we're sitting right now and did that interview. And he ended up I was in a segment of a video. If you want to watch the video, I think it's like Last to Scream wins $10,000. He did something haunted at SeaWorld. But yeah, he picked me up. We bought breakfast. I was with him for about an hour and a half first, and we just kind of got to know each other. It felt really like I was talking to a friend. And then after that, it was just such a cordial experience to have with someone. What it taught me was like, if I'm, God willing, if I ever get in that position, I'd like to be able to do something similar or be humble enough to be able to say, yeah, no, I can pick you up. I can drive us to an interview spot. He even offered to pay for breakfast too. And I was like, no, you can't do that. The whole thing is tweeting at you until I buy you breakfast. But like he read off, I did a giveaway at the time and he read the giveaway winner. So one of his fans got to hear their name through like me as a channel for it to happen. And so, yeah, it was just so cool. I've never reached out again to him because one thing is like, I don't want to be,
a nuisance.
Yeah, or anything like that. I think that's kind of a detriment to me as a networker is maybe I could check in. I've never been good at that, but no, it was just fantastic. He was great. And,
I gotta jump in and just,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, for the viewers, if you know or don't know, this guy has like 20 million views.
Yeah.
He lives in a mansion in San Diego, and it's funny because he makes the type of content where I question, where the target audience is kids. There's really choppy edits, and I question, I'm like, damn, is that like true to you? And I've heard stories, not just from Josh, that this stuff where guy bought Josh's flight, picked him up, hung out with him, drove him to his own interview, paid for his own flight, read his own giveaway, and I'm like, dude, I don't care what he uploads to the internet. That's what I want to be like when I'm
Right.
big, and that just speaks so much to his character, and it's definitely one of those don't judge a book by its cover moments for me, and it's very cool to.
Yeah, it was great. One of my favorite moments of it was I had a friend who I told we were doing it, and he was like, dude, no way. And then I'm like, well, two. I called my cousin.
Yeah.
I FaceTimed my cousin, and I was like, dude, you got to pick up right now. And he used to watch FaZe Rock all the time. And he picks up, and I was like, here, Sam, someone wants to talk to you. And he goes, yo, what's up, man? And that was my cousin talking, and my favorite was like, what's up, dude? Good to meet you. And they're just like talking for 5 minutes. And then in the car, I FaceTimed another buddy. And so it's just like the willingness to do stuff like that. It's just been really cool.
Wow.
I've seen that guy get hate, and I'll never understand it. I mean, even if you don't like his content, it's like he's a genuinely good guy. And so, yeah.
Dude, that's just a really incredible story.
Yeah. And then the most recent one I did, which to call it recent is unfair because it was over a year and a half now, maybe. I did Colin and Samir, and they were 23 days, I think, and they were great too.
Only 23 days for them to say yes.
Yeah, well, so that's what was kind of helpful is now my pinned tweet shows that I've done it before. And so a creator can reach out to the people I've done, and hopefully they'll be like, oh, no, he's chill.
That's super.
You know what I mean?
Colin and Samir is a really big one because they give you a ton of credibility in the creator's face.
Yeah,
And
I hope so.
I mean, they do. Well, like, they've had everyone on.
They do
But
know a lot of people.
If you interviewed them a year ago, they're already so much more relevant, I feel like. Like, every year, they're in an interesting niche. The niche of Colin and Samir is literally how do you grow as a creator. So them themselves can't be that massive because their audience is creators. But they're probably... It was so silent here for a moment.
I know.
They're probably the biggest creator for creators.
Oh, for sure. And like you can see it just with their brand deals or with how YouTube themselves uses Colin and Samir as icons. I mean, they're so in and they're so down to earth. It was funny. I don't know. It was probably my second best interview, but there were moments where there's a significant age gap between me and them. And so there were times where it came up. I remember one time there was a moment where the iPad wasn't working. And I was trying, two things happened during that interview that were like, one, the iPad wasn't working to get into the tweets to start reading questions people had submitted on Twitter.
Yeah.
And so I just kept saying, I'm going to look at, I noticed I had said tweets too many times.
Yeah.
And so I was like, getting the tweets on Twitter that people have tweeted at me. I'm getting these tweets from Twitter. Like, I wanted to make sure. And then finally they laughed, right? And I think they did find it funny, but I was like, man, that was tough. I needed to kind of stall for a minute.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that happened was I don't know a thing about lacrosse. They talk about lacrosse a lot.
Oh.
And they both have played college lacrosse.
I played lacrosse, so that would have been good for me.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'm going to I think it'd be funny to bring up the lacrosse stats. And, read them off and then just ask them about lacrosse.
That's just hilarious.
And I'm like, I actually have here your lacrosse stats. And immediately they're like, oh, well, we need to caveat this. I had an ACL injury. And I'm like, oh, no, are these bad stats? Because I had no clue. That's on me. I should have contextualized. And they were great about it. They weren't actually like mad or anything. But I remember sitting there to myself like, oh, man, what have I
It's pretty funny.
dug myself into? What kind of hole here? But they were great. I think their head producer still gave me his business card and said, hey, if you ever want to reach out. And he's been a mentor for me consistently. And so it was just a great experience. And yeah. So.
Wow. Do you stay in contact with any of the three?
The producer? You have Colin. Oh, you mean of Colin and Samir?
FaZe Rug.
Sorry, I heard it as Colin and Samir, Chris Schwar, and no, because I don't have a good reason to. There is a good reason to. It's because you're networking, right?
Yeah.
But it's tough for me to like say, hey, what's up? You know what I mean? Like the only person I would have felt like that might have been acceptable was FaZe Rug.
Yeah.
But I didn't live out here. I wasn't going to go get lunch with him again or go hang out with him. You know what I mean? And so to message him, maybe I could have messaged him when I said, hey, moved out to San Diego, would love to get a bite to eat. But like, I don't know. And this is something that maybe it's a confidence issue for me. I don't know that that's what my role was from a social standpoint there. I don't want to misrepresent what that was outside of a nice gesture he had for me and, something very kind to do. I felt comfortable with him as a friend there, but the gap in between, I just don't know that it'd be a guy who would be like, hey, let's go get lunch or something like that,
That's interesting.
Now, if I were bigger and there's room for collaborations or I've made more of a name for myself and I wasn't so worried that they'd feel like I was trying to grab onto them for clout like a ton of people do, then I'd definitely be like, hey, you remember me? Like, let's go. I'd love to chat it up, dive into those relationships a little bit more. But I do worry because of how frequent it is, right? That if I were to reach out, they'd feel like, oh, this kid is just coming back for more clout, more everything. And
that is such an interesting dynamic that I want to say the average person, this makes it sound like I'm looking down, but not the average. When I say the average person, what I mean is the non-creator.
Right. Wouldn't understand that dynamic. Yeah.
And I live in that dynamic, especially as a podcaster. And there's two kind of things I've realized. And I've been lucky enough to have a few big guests, not FaZe Rug or Mike Malak, but I do find that people can read your heart. And so much of it comes with what you do after. It's like, are you going around telling everyone like, me, FaZe Rug, me, FaZe Rug, me, FaZe Rug? And that was actually a real big idol I had of myself before I came up with the soul wealth message. I don't think I ever had a money issue. I just came from a family that was well off. I've never
had a money issue either.
I was never insanely rich. I was never poor. My dad never talked about money. At no point in my life did I idolize money. And hopefully that will stay true.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that was me was status. I really idolized status. And maybe it was because I was like a bullied kid in high school where my biggest motivation for many years was I want the people who made fun of me or who looked down on me to like see me on this pedestal. And that was something I really had to kill before I got here. But now that I've had the opportunity to interview quite a few people and to me, so you heard me say at the beginning, I measure success by relationships and memories. If I sit down with someone, no matter if they're 5 subscribers or 5 million, if I don't feel like I can be their friend or that I've created a real relationship, that's a loss to me. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. And I do know like that doesn't mean like every big guest I have, I'm like calling them up every day. But there's so many big guests where I thought like, damn, would that be weird to call them? And I just shoot them FaceTimes. And there's YouTubers that I used to watch that I FaceTime once a week now. And they're like genuinely my friends. And I was like, why was I so in my head about it before? And I think people read your heart. And that actually a lot of big creators, you would think they would have everyone in the world around them. But because they're so big and they get all this pressure in social settings, they actually don't have that many close friends.
Yeah.
So then when they sit down and have a real genuine conversation and you're FaceTiming them and you're not putting it on the internet and they're like, I've had really good experiences where I've created connections with bigger people, but I do just think it comes down to like your heart and your intentions.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's definitely something to that. I've thought about it. Maybe I will. I'm
not trying to like.
No, I got you.
Go get your face all.
Right. No, but I think
perspective.
I think there's value there too, especially within the creator space. I think a lot of times there's a point to who can I really trust? Who really are my friends, people around me. And I think that can get lost. And so, yeah, no, I think you raise a valid point and something that's important to remember. Really, just in life, with whenever you're into, because you don't know where people are coming from, and to presume that that's what they would think about you is presumptuous. You know what I mean?
I'm going to say this is not to call you out, but if you were to follow the track record of all your experiences, let's say he's Rug, who's to say he wouldn't?
No, yeah.
But I also totally see your perspective where it's like, this guy gave me a great gift, like, I'm going to take it and be happy.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just reading a room, which is a very good skill. I also want to point out that you're like a very well-spoken person. You speak very well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And
naturally, so, I mean, it seems you've done content for a while, but I would say you're a much better speaker than other content creators at your level.
Yeah, I think my dad, well, I was always raised, like, my parents always talked to me like an adult, which had good and bad stuff with it.
Yeah.
But because of that, I don't know. I think being able to articulate deeper sentences and meaning through sentences early might have come from that. And my dad's always been I've always watched my dad. He's very good at interacting with people. He's very articulate. He's a writer. And so,
what does he write for?
He's just got his own blog. I feel like an awful son. I want to plug the website right now, but it's like jeffreyscottwriting.com. I know you can go to delmarvazone.com and you'll get somewhere to him, but go check out my father's writing. They're awesome. But I think that's where it comes from is both my parents have been very good at talking to people and very good at emotionally understanding them. And so I know it comes from them. I just don't know what parts, I guess.
I have a follow-up question regarding your parents. In the content creator space, especially where we're at, which to define to the audience, I've created probably a lot longer than you. I've been on YouTube for 4 years. How long have you?
Oh, no. I've been doing this since I was like 8.
Oh, really?
My channel is probably 6 years old. I've been consistently creating for probably 3 years, if you want to even call it consistent. But no, I've been making my first videos like when I was.
Oh, that's insane. Okay, that was totally a
Minecraft video
misstatement by me. But where I was going with this is that our generation's parents, most of them do not see YouTube as a career, and I think they're starting to hear Mr. Beast as a $1 billion brand, and they're starting to understand it a little bit. But it is very, very common for someone who's at mine or Josh's level for their parents not to support them. Including my parents, most of the time did not support me. And I would say a majority of creators at my level have the same experience. But from what you've talked about, it kind of sounds not that way. And I'm so curious what...
They were always very good at saying, what you can do. Like, we believe that whatever you want to do, you can do, right? My dad, he's more creatively driven than my mother, I would say. And so I think he thought I could turn YouTube into a real career earlier than my mom. Now, it wasn't that my mom was saying I couldn't, but there was a little bit more pressure on having a plan B from my mother, which is not a bad thing. I'm not, but I could kind of read between the lines that it wasn't that she didn't believe in me. She just wasn't sure that it was even an option that was really that possible.
Yeah.
And then I eventually made it into the YouTube Partner Program, which means my videos can make money. And she started to see that. I remember when she saw that I made like, I think $36 off of one video. She's like, oh, that's cool, Well, he's in that, but there was still a little bit like that. And then I had one video. It's going to hit 1 million by the end of this NFL season, I think.
It was at 1 million when I looked at it today.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Really?
I could be wrong, but I looked at it briefly before the podcast.
Well, okay. I'll have to look
at it. You should look at it mid-podcast just so I can.
I don't even know where I put my phone. Hold on, I will check.
Okay, we're gonna get a live first.
I know. Sorry.
Reaction.
This
is good.
Screw it.
But if you don't have 1 million views,
I won't be mad. It will be funny though.
If I totally just miss.
I'll be like, oh, gotcha. Yeah. Well, check YouTube Studio. That has the actual number. How about that?
All right. For the audio listeners, Josh is pulling up his YouTube to see if he hit his first 1 million views.
Yeah, I did.
Let's go, bro. Congrats.
Straight up 1 million right now. Wow.
Damn, I'm glad I could.
Dude, that's so sick. Wow, what a moment. I'm glad I got that on video. Dude, that's awesome. There's literally no other scenario where I would have filmed myself seeing
You said
that.
by the end of the season, that's like 2 more months.
I know, let's go. Maybe I'll have 1.1 million. Who knows? Yeah, dude, that's sick. No, so anyway, I think when my mom saw that, and then subsequently, because I was in the partner program by that time, the money that came from that, I think 2 things happened. One, she's like, oh, he can make money off this, but 2, that video was not attributed to a FaZe rug.
Yeah.
No connection to Colin and Samir, no connection to Mike Malek. That's a Joshua Scott front to back original video that I was able to, without influencer piggybacking or anything like that, generate that number. And so it was like, oh, he can do this. And so I remember the switch, because now it's less, hey, be working on your plan B. That's still there. You know, that's why I'm in college, is for her. She's worked. She's paying for my college, and she's worked very hard, and that's been her one ask. So no matter what, even if I were to start full-time content creating, I mean, I would find a way to make sure I get a degree by the end of it. Yeah. Kind of like how an NFL player ends up with a degree. Yeah. But it switched to like, hey, when's the next YouTube video? You need to be working on YouTube. Yeah. You know? And so now it's almost like, oh, they're so in that like I get shamed if I haven't uploaded a video, which is great because that needs to happen. But that was really cool for me, because that was almost, the reward isn't really the number. The number comes and goes. Yeah. I didn't even check today, right? Yeah. And you saw. And so, yeah, I mean, what's really rewarding at this point, the money doesn't even feel, I'm not making like Mr. Beast money, but it's significant to the point where like it's paid for a couple upcoming projects I have. And that doesn't even feel real. That's super cool. But what's rewarding is seeing the belief and kind of seeing how proud my mom was specifically in that moment. Not that I didn't feel like she believed in me to the point. She's always been very clear and supportive. But seeing it click and kind of seeing the way she talked about it shift was really cool.
That's, I find myself challenging the solo narrative a lot this episode, which is good. But I
because it's so view oriented.
No, I'm not even saying this, but it's true that numbers do a huge thing for one's belief.
That's true.
Which is, if this podcast got 1 million views, it wouldn't change
how much you wanted to do it. Right.
But I would definitely be like, and I will never tell someone I don't believe in myself. I do. But I liken it to a huge music creator I had on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he joined a big record label. And he said, now looking back, he says, like a lot of musicians do, he's like, I don't know if it was the right decision. But he says, it was what I needed because it was validation that I was who I say I am. Like, I knew I was a good musician, and I believed it, and I told everyone, but that, like, made me really believe it. And it's like, you get a taste, like, tasting the world, which oftentimes looks like numbers, is such a valuable thing for adding to your own belief.
Yeah, it was. I remember when it took off. I remember, it's funny, that was by far the most I've worked on a video. And I remember I uploaded it at like 9 a.m. and I went back to bed because I was up so late editing it. And I woke up and it was like kind of underperforming. And I was like, ugh. And I get in the car and it was doing a little bit better. It started to get to like, I think by the time I got in the car, it had like 300 views. Yeah. I was like, this is cool. It's doing better for my channel. Nothing crazy. I'm like, all right, on to the next project. That's typically my mindset. Yeah. I remember I drove 2.5 hours back home from my other grandparents' house. I get out of the car. I open up the YouTube app. It's at 6K. And that's a 1 out of 10 for me. I'm like, whoa, how did that happen? Next morning I wake up, 36,000. I'm like, what's going on? Yeah. Long story short, now today I'm at 1 million, right, on it. And so.
Wait, how long ago did you upload it?
Let's see. This would have been maybe I think it was February, maybe March. It was March. I think it was around March 3rd. So a little while ago. Yeah.
Dude, that's interesting. I was looking at your content and I was trying to ask myself why this video versus the other videos.
I think I can tell you why from a business perspective.
I'm going to give you mine. Okay. I want to hear yours.
Cool. Yours is definitely going to be more soul
Yeah,
oriented.
mine's is way more soul
Like
oriented.
the business here's why. So This is
Okay.
cool.
So I was mostly comparing to the desert video, which is the following video, or
Which I love the desert video, but yeah, it's kind of humbling that one didn't
Okay.
do well.
and this is totally the soul of the answer, which you're predicting.
Okay.
But I was looking through your real Twitter. I didn't find the tweet to breakfast because I didn't know it was called tweet to
Yeah.
breakfast.
That's bad on me,
I
branding
saw-
wise, that you couldn't find it. I gotta thank you for notifying me of that.
Part of the issue was that I found your regular Twitter and I was just like, this is his Twitter.
Right.
And I didn't go continue to look for the tweet for breakfast. I just thought it was in the past, which was stupid because you told me Ryan Strahan was current. But I felt on your Twitter there was a ton of sports content and there was a ton of football content. So I said, well, Josh is clearly passionate about football. And if you're a Patriots fan, then you're obviously passionate because they're the most passionate people.
Right.
Especially if you grew up in the Tom Brady era.
Oh yeah.
And so I was just like, well, it's a no-brainer. He's really passionate about football, and I don't think he's that passionate about this 24-hour challenge in the desert. And that was my answer. But now I want to hear the business answer.
So the niche of VR.
Just before you say that, too, to clarify to the audience, it's not that you can't make a great video about something you're passionate about, but I think there's an element of your nature coming out that the audience can feel when you're true to yourself.
Interesting.
And that's
There's probably a little bit of that too. It's probably easier when it's a topic to edit, at least, that you're passionate about. Then there's two niches that one plays into. It's the video game football niche, which a lot of times you have Madden and stuff like that, which typically any football type of video isn't produced very well. Or I shouldn't say it like that, but it's different. It's not like these high level edited storytelling videos like Mr. Beast or Ryan Trahan or something like that. It's typically more like old Let's Plays that you'd see. So 20-minute long videos that you just kind of sit down and watch through. There's not like high edit cuts or anything like that. So that's the football area. Then it also steps into a secondary niche, which is VR, because it's the whole video. Didn't explain the premise of the video.
Yeah.
Essentially, there's a game on the Oculus where you are a quarterback, and I played an entire season in VR, and so that's the title. I played an entire NFL season in VR.
But
So
just for the audience, because I'm imagining myself, this might be confusing. He put on a headset and made himself the quarterback of the New England Patriots, and he played an entire NFL season in the virtual reality headset.
Right.
I just want to clarify in case someone doesn't know what that is.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, so yeah, that's what the idea was. And so it stems into that football, which again, not very high edited, and then VR, which is just not a ton of yet. And also because there's not a ton of it, I don't want to call it lazy, but it's not high produced, right? So you've got two areas that aren't high production. Me, that's not like at the level of super high production of Mr. Beast. Like if I were to go make another challenge video, right? I can't compete totally with Mr. Beast right now. But in these other niche areas, I think, this is a running theory because I haven't replicated it yet, but it's easier for me to compete there because my editing style is something that hasn't really been brought into those spaces yet. And so that's why those are spaces that are easier to get in. There's not a ton of videos in that space, and out of those videos, mine is one of the most entertaining. I'm trying to stay like, I'm not trying to hype it up, but like statistically speaking, if you go look up NFL video game on YouTube right now, I'm near positive that mine would be one of the first results to come up.
I feel like I can explain what you're saying, which is that it comes down to supply and demand. If someone wants to watch a 24-hour challenge in the desert, no offense, but there's
a lot
better options in the sense that people had bigger budgets, bigger teams. Mr. Beast, who has almost 200 million subscribers, just did Stranded on a Boat, which is not the same exact video, but it's
right. It's similar, like survival challenge.
Someone might want to watch something in that niche and come upon your video or Mr. Beast video,
and they're gonna go, yeah.
But it's the football one's different enough where the supply and demand, you have much lower competition. It's much more innovative in the space. So although the titles and thumbnails are similar, you're putting yourself at a huge supply and demand advantage.
Yeah, and I have an upcoming video that will kind of test this theory a little bit. We'll see. It kind of dips into both, I think.
One you told me. about Apple. I'm not gonna say it.
No. That one.
But
That one will kind of really dip into both. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
It'll either be the best investment I've ever made or the biggest waste of money I've ever made. But
yeah,
we'll see. But no, I have one. Actually, I'm not. It's a VR video that has something to do with Halloween and a large brand, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to. So that video was copied, the NFL VR one, and it made a lot of.
Yeah.
Got a lot of views, and so I'm a little cautious to say stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. Don't say it.
Put it out there, but I'll
be aware. Be looking out for his channel in October.
So yeah, that'll be end of October near Halloween. I'm definitely doing that one. I just got to get this other video out soon. But
I appreciate you sitting out here until it's literally.
I know this has been a lot of fun. I'm sorry I waited till
no, bro. It's a great
5:30 to get it done.
I mean, I'm all about those raw moments. So actually, something about being on a cliff with a bright light and just the dimmest sunset and people still in the water. There's something that feels surreal about this moment.
No, it's super cool. It's really serene.
I will ask you my outro question, which is completely from the perspective of soul wealth. I ask every guest this.
Okay.
Is when you die, what do you want people to say about you? Take your time. It's a question of legacy.
It's funny. I wonder how this question will change. Well, I mean, the easy thing is I made a better impact, but I want my kids to feel like I love them.
Family man.
Unconditionally. And then I want everyone who had interacted with me to have felt heard. Or like in any space or anything like that. Those two. I'll keep it simple. I want my kids to have known that I love them and people to have felt heard when in my presence.
Yeah, bro. Making others feel heard is such a big one for me too, and I think that FaZe Rug story you told was such a good example of making people feel heard.
Yeah. No,
this was a good episode, bro. Oh.
Awesome, brother.
Hey. I probably would keep going if it wasn't.
It wasn't the dark. Hey, maybe again in a
little bit
down the line
after the next 1 million views.
Yes, there we go.